Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Hope you all had a great weekend. Thank you so much for joining us. A menstrual cycle can cause with a whirlwind of emotions, fatigue, pains, and other symptoms at various times of the month. And while having a period is, part of life, living in discomfort doesn't always need to be. That's why we're going to discuss cycle syncing on today's IG Live. Cycle syncing is when you change lifestyle habits like your diet or exercise routine to match the phases of your menstrual cycle. So today's guest is Dr. Rachel Vong, a Toronto naturopathic doctor that focuses on hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, and digestive health. So we're going to ask Dr. Vong about cycle syncing, which types of foods you should eat during each cycle, and the right exercises so that you don't burn yourself out. So I think, Doctor.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Sorry, I'm just kind of adjusting my
Also,
volume here.
tell us a little bit about your background, like how you became a specialist in thyroid care.
Yeah, it's an interesting story because I actually didn't have a thyroid issue myself. I did go through my own kind of health journey, tribulations, especially with anxiety, and gut issues. Like that was kind of what I was dealing with. But then I discovered like naturopathic medicine. I kind of went through the schooling. I became a naturopathic doctor, and I was seeing a lot of women specifically with a lot of like hormone issues. But then all of a sudden, I kept seeing like the same types of people walking through the door, like the woman who was extremely exhausted, who had their hair falling out, who just couldn't lose weight. And it kept like recurring. And so the problem with these women is that they had no answers, right? So their doctors never did any proper testing. There was nothing wrong with them. So then when we did the proper testing investigation and I did, full thyroid panels and all of that, majority of the time it was always an underactive thyroid that came up. So I was like kind of like really surprised, I would say, at like how many women were coming to the door with undiagnosed thyroid issues. And so I kind of started doing a little bit more digging, and I just realized like how much of a gap that exists in the conventional, I guess, approach to treating hypothyroidism, especially Hashimoto's. So it became like a passion of mine. I did a lot of extra learning in it, and all of a sudden it just kind of like flowed. All these women with thyroid issues started coming to see me, and then you know what, I fell in love with it. So that's kind of how it came to treating thyroid issues. But like I said, there's such a gap, and so functional medicine, naturopathic medicine has such an important integral place in the treatment of these
You kind of like you kind of lead to my next question is that what is a naturopathic doctor?
Yeah.
And then I mean I can already see it and how they could help a person with hormonal or period problems.
Yeah, so with naturopathic medicine, I always tell my patients like the biggest difference that I would say separates like a conventional medical doctor with like a naturopathic or functional doctor is, I don't use any pharmaceutical medications, and that differs from country to country, province to province. But where I live in Ontario, Canada, we don't use any pharmaceuticals. So everything within our treatment umbrella is truly natural. So vitamins and nutrients, herbs, acupuncture, diet, lifestyle, all the things, right? But I would say the biggest differentiating factor that I always emphasize is that I'm always looking for the root cause. I'm always asking the questions of why. Why are you feeling the way that you're feeling? Why is your body doing that? Because as much as it's great to put band-aids on our symptoms, if we don't actually address the root cause, the symptoms will continue. So especially when it comes to hormones, thyroid health, period health, whatever it might be, I find that a lot of the conventional treatments are very much band-aid approaches. It only will kind of help to mask the symptoms, but there's still that bigger question of why do you have irregular periods in the first place? Why do you not have a period? Why do you have painful periods? So that's kind of where we need to dig deeper and understand the answers to those questions. And that's where
Absolutely. I think like whenever women have period issues, like the very, very common approach is they get prescribed birth control pills. That's it. Like it's always that.
Yeah.
And then you run into the problem, okay, which kind? And then after you be on it for a long time, how are you going to remove yourself from it? And then just like and causing even more issues.
Exactly. Exactly. And because I focus on thyroid disorders, like a lot of women have period problems. Like they have a lot of irregular periods or painful periods or whatever it might be. And it's because the thyroid affects hormones in such an intimate way. And so a lot of these women are going to their doctors without knowing, let's just say they have a thyroid issue, or even if they know they have a thyroid issue, doctors are still prescribing birth control pills on top of their thyroid medication as another symptomatic band-aid. Whereas the root of it all was actually the thyroid problem. So I see it so many times.
Before we get into, cycle thinking, you had a really great post like recently stated that, cycle thinking helped your own healing journey. So, do you think your healing journey also helped shape some of the, the recommendations that you give to your clients?
Absolutely. And no, I'll be honest with you. We learn about cycles and hormones in school, but I never thought about like applying the concept of cycle syncing into my life until more recently. And I'm telling you, it's made the world of a difference for me. And especially with like my personal medical background, like history, struggling with anxiety and struggling with burnout, just being like very high stress, high strung all the time. Like cycle syncing has made such a huge difference in that respect. Just understanding my body better. And I know we'll get into this in more detail, but like understanding exactly what's happening in my body so that I can actually live my life with a little bit more ease, instead of pushing against my hormones.
I love it. I love it. Working with your hormones instead of against it. I gave a brief intro into, cycle syncing during, before we started. Now that we have, tell us like, what is cycle syncing?
Yeah, so just like as a very general term, cycle syncing is just basically aligning your life, your nutrition, your exercise. I would even say like your work around the different phases of your cycle. Because as women, we are cyclical beings. Like our hormones are all over the place all the time. And that doesn't make it a bad thing. It's just that this is what's natural for us, right? We have estrogen and we have progesterone, we have testosterone, we have all these different hormones that are constantly fluctuating throughout our cycle. And so when we, again, can better align our nutrition and our exercise and our productivity with those different phases, we ourselves come out as healthier, happier people. And so this is kind of what the concept of cycle syncing is. It's just understanding those patterns and how to align.
So basically, like why cycle syncing is really important is so that you can really align your life and actually live better and really optimize your performance and then your health, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, so I'll just give you an example. Again, with my own personal experience with it. Like I would consider myself more of like a type A person, right? Like I was always that way even throughout university and all that. So like I like to do a lot of things, right? I'm an entrepreneur, obviously. As you can see on Instagram, like I have my own business. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I see patients. I'm also a mom of 2 young boys. Like my life is very busy, And so if I was going at the same pace, like 100% of the time, I would burn myself out. And I think I see this a lot with my patients, especially my thyroid patients, is that they're all in burnout because they are busy being moms and they're busy being career women and they're busy being wives or partners. Like they're just go on all the time, But because I've learned, again, about my own personal like menstrual cycle and I've learned about this whole concept about cycle syncing, I can make adjustments in my life so that I don't feel like I'm pushing myself into burnout all the time. So when I have this conversation all the time with my patients, it's just to understand your limits at certain parts of your cycle. Because we have choices, we have options, right? We can choose to do certain types of like exercises at certain parts of the cycle where it's more, again, aligned with what your hormones want or what your body can handle, So when we have that conversation and people make that shift, it honestly makes a huge difference with energy and stress, like the ability to handle external stressors, with sleep, with hormones. Like it makes a big difference all around. So I definitely apply that to my
Love it.
teachings and my
So we're
patients
gonna
for
break
sure.
down each phases of the cycle, but first, like, tell us what's like the average window for cycles.
Yeah. So generally speaking, when we talk about like the menstrual cycle, it's a 28-day cycle, right? But as we know, every woman is so different. So it's not always 28 days. Sometimes it can be 26 days, it could be 32 days. Like there's definitely variations in that. And then we have four distinct, I would say, phases throughout that cycle. And again, there are variations that exist within that. So our menstrual, like our actual like menstruation period is when we bleed, and that can vary from 3 to 6 days, generally speaking. And then we have our follicular phase, which is like the time after our period until we ovulate, which can be from day, let's just say 5 all the way to day 14, plus or minus a few days. Ovulation happens kind of like in the midpoint, typically speaking, of a cycle. That can happen around day 14, but again, it could happen on day 12, it could happen on day 16. And then that last phase is our luteal phase, and that happens after we ovulate until we get our next period, which can also be, 12 to 14 days long, right? So but generally speaking, that
So
what it looks
the
like.
first 5 days, the menstruation phase, so what happens in the body? Like, what are the best exercise to do during that time?
Yes. So when we bleed, obviously we're losing a lot of blood, we're losing a lot of nutrients, we're losing a lot of iron. So our energy tends to be on the lower end, but also our hormones in general are very, very low. Like our estrogen levels are pretty minimal. Progesterone barely existent. Testosterone, all of our hormones as a whole are on the lower end. And so when you combine that with the nutrient loss from bleeding, we just feel tired. And so we have to respect that. Listen to what I mean. If you pushed yourself to do some high intensity interval training during your period, there's no way you're going to feel super great after that, right? So we have to recognize when our body needs to rest. And the best time to do that is during our bleed. So resting is absolutely okay. So you don't have to exercise. You can do a bit of walking. Some people like to do yoga and stretching exercises, just anything that's very like low impact, low intensity, or again, just resting, sitting on the couch with a heating pad on your belly, like that's okay. So that's what I would recommend.
So you mentioned that during menstruation we were losing iron, right? Right. And then so what are the other than iron, like what type of nutrients that you would need during this phase, and what's your, go-to meal during that time?
Yeah, so again, iron is something that I really want to make sure, like, with my patients, we always do blood work, so we have to check ferritin levels as a whole. And so if your ferritin levels are already kind of low, we can suspect or expect that when you bleed, you're even lower. So supplementing with iron can be great. It just depends on kind of like what your baseline is. Zinc is also a really great nutrient.
Okay, here you're back.
Magnesium can be really great as well, because sometimes when people experience cramping pains, like your uterine lining is shedding, right? So your uterus is a muscle. It's literally working to expel that lining out. Sometimes we can experience cramping, and that's why I love magnesium during this time to kind of help with easing that little bit of that cramping pain, and just allowing it to kind of flow a little bit easier. So those are the kind of, in terms of like nutrients, that I really, really like. Foods, you know, I really aim to go towards more like easily digestible foods, because at this time, again, your body, it's losing energy, it's losing nutrients. So you want to do something that's really like easy for our bodies to handle. So I usually opt for like warm foods, soups, stews, that kind of thing. I kind of avoid, I don't know about you, but like I'm kind of intuitive in my body. So whenever I see a salad when I'm like on my period, no. Like salads don't like it. There's no appeal to me with like fresh raw foods. I like more of like that, again, warm, cooked stews and soups, right? And I think that that tends to be the best
Love
for
it,
your
love
body
it.
at that time.
Totally aligned. I love it. So the next phase is the follicular phase. You know, what happens in the body? Like, what's the best exercise to do during this phase?
Yeah, so during the follicular phase, after we've done our bleed, our hormones are now starting to rise, right? So estrogen is starting to kind of go up. And as a result, we actually start noticing a pickup of energy, which is great. So again, when you can recognize that, when you can reflect and feel that like little bit of energy, follow that cue. So it means that you can actually start doing a little bit more. I wouldn't say like intense workouts, but you can still be doing a little bit more. And it's okay to break a bit of a sweat. So if you wanted to go for a hike, or you wanted to do some more flow-based yoga, like cardio, whatever that might look like for you, that's okay. And it's actually great. So, and then you can start picking up the intensity.
And then what about the nutrients and also your go-to meal during follicular phase?
Yeah. So I still would focus on iron just because, you've already lost still some iron from the bleed. So it's okay to kind of focus on iron-rich foods or iron supplements and whatnot. But this is a time where I start thinking about estrogen metabolism, right? So estrogen is our female sex hormone. It's responsible for a lot of things in our bodies, but sometimes we tend to have a lot of extra estrogen, and that can cause not so good symptoms in terms of PMS and things like that. So before we even can get there, it can be sometimes a good idea to start eating foods that kind of help with metabolizing it and clearing it out of your body quicker. So things like cruciferous vegetables, like lots of those like veggies are really great for the liver. I would still do more like, warm foods. You can even do some fermented foods to help with the gut bacteria, to help with, again, metabolizing your estrogen. So sauerkraut, kimchi, that kind of stuff, broccoli sprouts, whatever. And then I like teas. I'm a big tea drinker. So like I like my dandelion, nettle, milk thistle tea to help with, again, liver support. So that's kind of what I do phasing into like the follicular
So the next
phase.
one is ovulation. What happens during that time? Exercise and go to meal.
Yeah, so I would say as women, ovulation is our like goddess time. Like we kind of just bloom during ovulation. You can usually see when a woman is in ovulation because she is so confident and she has so
Glowing.
much energy and just like she's just shining and glowing, So and it's because our hormones are at its peak. So usually our estrogen will reach its peak. Even our testosterone, like as us as females, we still have a little bit of testosterone, and even that peaks during ovulation. And that's why sometimes we can feel like a surge of libido as well. So we just feel great during this time. And so I find that this is the best time if you wanted to do something that's more high intensity. This is the best time to allow your body to handle it because we have the, I guess, capacity to, So if you feel like it, you want to do that, I don't know, HIIT workout, you wanted to go to the gym and just do some like more like heavier weights, like go for it. Of course, to an extent, like again, I work with a lot of patients with thyroid issues. So anything that's too intense is not great for the thyroid. So you still need to like listen to your body and reflect and just to make sure that it's appropriate for you. But in like generally speaking, ovulation is a great time to do more of those like high intensity training.
So in terms of diet and nutrients, do you then like, because you're doing more exercise, do you like consume more protein kind of based things, or what do you eat?
Absolutely. Yeah. So protein, I would say, is a big one. Again, fiber is still really great, even during that some like follicular phase because you want to help with, again, metabolizing estrogen. But protein for sure to support the extra like workouts, but also because the body is able to like handle more, you can kind of go crazy and eat whatever you really want. But like in terms of like raw foods, smoothies, juices, like that's the time where I think I crave my salads, right? So then I start like really wanting that freshness, the fruits, the veggies. So yeah, that's the time I would say like you can definitely go for that. And it's interesting that like even our carb requirement at the time is not super high, so you don't really need to have as much carbs as you normally would. until you hit that luteal phase. Which
I almost
we'll
feel
talk
like
about next.
ovulation phase, since you have a lot of energy, if you, I'm just thinking about work, you know, if you have like intense like project deadline or something, maybe that's a good time to like really think about, you know, have high like not only exercise, but your
Yes.
work intensity can
Yeah,
also be a little bit higher during that time.
exactly. So this is what I was talking about earlier with like even cycling your work, because again, as an entrepreneur, like I can technically I have a little bit more flexibility and to choose when I want to take on what projects or do certain things. So what I do now is I definitely schedule my things around automation, like the planning phase anyway, you know, when I really need to like sit down and be productive, I do it around ovulation. And it's worked out so well for me because I feel like my productivity skyrockets in around that like late follicular and around ovulation. That's
Now
the
I
best
feel
time
like
for
I
me.
need to like
So
label my work calendar what's my cycle is, and then making sure like when to scheduling for meetings, you know.
yeah, honestly, I think it would make such a big difference for any woman's life. Like if they could somehow just like align again their work schedule, like if possible, right? Obviously, but it makes a big difference because if I am trying to do some like a new project when I'm in my bleeding phase or my late luteal phase, like I can be staring at the screen for hours and it's just blank, you know? And it's just because like your body's just not equipped with the energy and the motivation to do those things, right? So when we push and push and push and we have these such high expectations for us to perform at 100% all the time, that adds stress, you know? And so it's like unnecessary stress that we can definitely avoid if we were to properly cycle like or sync our works and work our lifestyle and whatnot.
So lastly, let's talk about the luteal phase. You know, what happens and what kind of exercise and what kind of nutrients and diet you should be on.
Yeah. So for the luteal, again, because you've just ovulated and now our hormones are doing something very different. So estrogen now starts to come down, and progesterone is our other sex hormone that actually kind of dominates the luteal phase. But progesterone as a hormone is very different from estrogen, right? Estrogen is our like I would say more of like our energy, like higher energy female, you know, hormone, whereas progesterones are more like anti-anxiety and relaxation hormones. So I think this is partly why we feel a little bit more calm, a little bit more relaxed during luteal phase. Energy levels are starting to kind of come down a little bit as well. So kind of similar to the earlier parts of our cycle, we kind of want to start to ramp down on the intensity of our workouts. We want to be doing something that's a bit more like, you know, walking is still great. I love walking as an exercise, but lower impact strength training. We can still do some yoga, but I would say more like restorative yoga. You could even do Pilates. Pilates is great. So like those types of activities I would say are more aligned for that like luteal phase.
What about food?
Yeah, so for nutrients, so interestingly, our metabolic rate actually goes up in our luteal phase. So I don't know if many people know this, but our metabolism, like it also has this like rhythm throughout our cycle. So in the early stages of our cycle, in like the bleeding and so like early follicular phase, our metabolic rate is actually very low. And that's also partly why I think we are a little bit lower in energy. But then in the luteal phase, our metabolic rate goes up. So because of that, we actually can intake more calories, we can actually intake more carbs because our body can handle them. It can actually use them for energy, productive energy. So in this time of the cycle, I always say complex carbs are great. Again, still keeping up with like the protein and the fiber, but you can definitely get away with having actually. So I'm in my luteal right now. So for lunch today, I had soba noodles. That's like one of the go-tos, like buckwheat noodles, you know, quinoa, and also like root vegetables, so sweet potatoes, squash. Those are also really great as well for the luteal phase. So that's kind of like my go-to.
Yeah, this is so interesting. I also feel like luteal phase is the phase that I really crave a lot of carbs too. And it's almost like your body is telling you you need a little more and then you can process a little more too.
Yeah, and there's the reason you crave that, you know? But of course,
The
like
right type.
choosing the right types of carbs are going to make a difference because if we're always, you know, because our metabolic rate goes up, we're hungry more often. But then that can sometimes turn out to be a disaster if we're choosing more simple carbs and like, you know, just like more higher glycemic foods, for example, where it turns into sugar very, very quickly in our bodies. And so we experience more of these like sugar crashes throughout the day. And it can be like a vicious cycle as well. So we have to be very careful with like those cravings and just making sure that we choose the right types of carbs and you know, making sure that protein is in place with every meal to help also with the offsetting that carb load in our blood.
Wow.
You know?
This is amazing, but I can also see this can get very complicated for people, especially if they have, you know, irregular cycle and just navigating, you know, different phases and then understanding what's tailored for you and what to eat and what to do is hard. And I think that makes a huge difference if somebody can see someone expert like you to really facilitate them doing their cycle syncing. So I know you offer these like one-on-one service with clients. So tell us, like, you know, what does a session with you look like?
Yeah, so I'm a naturopathic doctor. If you live in Ontario, Canada, I can see you as like a private patient one-on-one. Generally, our first visit is 75 minutes long, so I do like full intake just to understand you and your health really, really well, because all parts and components of health are connected, right? So I want to learn about your digestion and your sleep and your stress levels and like all the things. And then usually I will come up with a treatment plan in that first visit that consists of dietary changes, lifestyle changes, supplements, all the things. And then usually we kind of see each other every 1 to 2 months, depending on what the goals are. We do any blood work and we'll kind of reassess that. But just know that it's a very comprehensive look at your health. And that's my biggest goal, is to ensure that I can put all the puzzle pieces together for you, you know, because sometimes like I find with conventional medicine, it's a very like tunnel visioned approach. And so, you know, when you're just going down one lane, you're missing all the scenery around it, which kind of adds to the experience, right? So the naturopathic medicine helps to kind of be well-rounded and comprehensive in that approach. So that's why we spend so much time with our patients, because we need the time to kind of understand exactly what's happening with their health. So I have that one-on-one side of it, but I also have a thyroid program. So for people who live outside of Ontario, if you want to work with me, then you can do so through my thyroid program called the Thyroid Reset System. That is also in my comprehensive thyroid program. It's a 3-month program. So we spend every week together in this 3-month program, and I will teach you everything you need to know. So there's topics on nutrition and exercise and adrenal support, gut health, liver health, environmental toxins, supplements, sleep, like literally all the aspects and all the things that you should know about when it comes to healing your thyroid and improving your hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, you get in this program. Plus, you get support from me. You can work very, very closely with me. I have one-on-one sessions in there, but I also go live every Thursday with my members and I answer questions. So you will have that very like high accountability in my program. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to send me a DM. Then
I love it. I love it. After you answered my question about one-on-one, that was actually my second question. Like, okay, what about people like outside Ontario who wants to work with you? So the Thyroid Reset System program is like perfect for this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And again, it's because you can think of it as like your one-stop shop, right? Because it's hard when you've been diagnosed with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's. I hate to say it, but the doctors don't give you that much information, right? It's just take this pill and be on your way. I'll see you in a year. But patients are like, what else do I do? Can I eat anything? Can I do something for my gut? Like, what can I do? And so I'm very like evidence-based. I look through a lot of research, and so I make sure that all my recommendations in my program are backed by the evidence available currently. And so I put everything in one place for people so that they don't have to do all this extra research and wonder like, is that even accurate? Is that even like scientifically backed, right? So that's like one of the things that I value very much about my program, is that the fact that it is all evidence-based information, and it's everything that you actually need to know to implement the right things in your life to help with improving your
I also really like your program that it not only helps with, treating and managing, there's a whole maintenance component too. That's why it's like really comprehensive, because then you're really giving patients the tools to go forward so they can really managing, maintaining their health status.
I always say, like, even though the program is technically what, 3 months or 6 months long, it doesn't matter if you get better in 3 months. It's, do you have the tools, as you say, to feel great and to improve your thyroid issues for years to come, because I would say that it's easy to feel better quickly, but it's harder to stay better for years, and so like the approach that I try to take in my program is setting you up for that long-term success. Of course, I want to see you succeed in the short term, but sometimes that's not realistic. And again, what's more important is how you navigate the ups and downs of life while still maintaining your health in the long
Amazing, amazing. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge with us today. I feel like now I'm gonna go into my calendar and start marking my phases for my cycle.
You should. You really should. Like I said, every woman who has a cycle should do it, even if you don't have a cycle, honestly. So for people who don't have periods, who have irregular periods, like, it's still very helpful. I think that you just need to be more in tune with your body, kind of like feel, because again, your body's very intuitive, right? So it's always sending you signals and signs. And so when it feels like your body doesn't want you to push, don't push, people, again, who don't have cycles at all, sometimes I tell them to follow the moon cycle, because the lunar cycle is very much, I would say, aligned and similar to our menstrual cycle. And so sometimes it kind of works out if you kind of go with the different phases of the moon. I know it sounds kind of like hokey pokey, but like, I've seen it to help a lot. So that's what I would recommend.
Amazing, amazing. So thank you so much for sharing today. And then we had a pretty decent turnout. And then I want to make sure everybody please follow Dr. Vong and then check out the services and then sign up for the Thyroid Reset program. So thank you so much.
Thank you. No, thank you for having
awesome.
me. It was a
Have a
great
good
conversation.
day. Bye.
You too. Bye.